Good morning. It is exactly 9 o'clock, according to Brian. So we're going to start because we have people who have much to share with us. As you remember, this is the second of 6 weeks that we're going to be talking about world mission. Next week, we're going to have a Zoom with Doug Dix in Jerusalem. So keep your fingers crossed on the technology. We have 2 people today. This is our only live presentation of real people. From Broad Street Presbyterian, I'm very excited. They're going to talk about their mission coworkers and how they support them. They're also going to talk about this book, and this is how I found out what great work they're doing, because they are lifted up in this book as a case study of how to do short mission well. So there's a whole chapter devoted to Broad Street's mission in this book. So we have Jen Bunker and Patty Nussel. Right. And it's all yours. Take it away. Okay. Do you want to take questions during, or do you want to wait?
We can do both. I mean, we're flexible. Yeah. Our challenge is we've got so much to share, and so we will try to keep it in check. So I'm Jen Bunker. I am a member of Broad Street, and first started short-term mission almost 20 years ago, and really kind of followed in the footsteps of Patty. So I'm going to kind of hand this off to Patty to start, and then I will follow up with a supplement that what's not included in the book, and some other references and how Broad Street has done short-term mission, but still following the same tenets that the authors share in freeing congregational mission. I'm on the Global National Mission Committee as well as an elder, and very appropriately, I just started a program through Pittsburgh Theological Seminary in missional leadership. So it's an 18-month program, actually led by Hunter Farrell, who is one of the co-authors of Freeing Congregational Mission. So I'm thinking about this in a much different way. So I have to be careful to just kind of share what I know, but also ask some good questions and hard questions of myself. So if that comes out, that's why I have that perspective. So I'm going to hand it over to Patty to get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. My name is Patty Nussel, and I'm a member of Broad Street, but I live on South Dorchester. I live a half a mile away. So many of you look familiar because oftentimes I stop in a covenant, like I don't know, Monday, Thursday, or a special service, or your summertime service where I'm on my bike and I'm riding to Broad Street, but suddenly the wind is a little too much, so I stop here at your service when it's time. So, and I work a lot with Susan Immel of Covenant on the Presbyterian mission activities with Capacity Helping Hands. So, so let's get started. Freeing Congregational Mission is the title of this book, and the subtitle is A Practical Vision for Companionship, Cultural Humility, and Co-Development. Next slide, please. That is a long title, but we're going to talk a little bit about it and then give you some examples of this book in action in a city in Peru called La Arroya, and also in the country of Malawi. This has a long title, but I call this book How to Do Mission Right. It's a stories, a handbook, workshops, worksheets, that sort of thing, especially short-term global mission trips. So lots of Presbyterian congregations do short-term mission trips, and this is a how-to book of how to do it right. Back up just a second. Reverend Dr. Hunter Farrell, I'm going to refer to him a lot as Hunter. He wrote the book with Bala. 25 years ago, Hunter was a young PCUSA missionary in Peru, and somebody at Broad Street said, hey, we need to do global mission. We weren't really doing it. And somebody said, hey, I know this young guy. He just started in the mission field in Peru. Why don't we connect with him? And we did. And 25 years later, we still have a very strong partnership. I bring that up because last week I heard you guys talk about your 4 mission coworkers that you've connected with. And I just want to say a personal relationship, somebody's interested in what you're doing and what this person's doing, that's always a good way to start. I've also been with groups that have done a huge big mission study and workshops and blah, 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 blah. And then, we end up picking a mission partner, but, it's certainly who the leader wanted all along. And in my experience, when the lay people at the church want to connect with a global mission partner, you're likely to have success. So good start. Dr. Farrell was a Peace USA mission coworker in Peru that for about a dozen years, and then he became director of world mission for the whole Presbyterian Church. So last week there were questions of the person talking about missionaries. How do you choose them? How do you pay them? Where does the money go? And I'm sitting there thinking, Hunter. That was his job, to take care of 247 PCUSA missionaries stationed around the world. I don't think we have that many now. As congregations shrink and Presbyterian congregations get mad over the gay lesbian issue and they stop getting money, their per capita or their mission dollars, literally we have fewer PCUSA missionaries in the field, and literally children in India and China aren't eating. You know, it's a direct effect. It's just amazing. Okay, so this book, Freeing Congregational Mission, sort of presumes we have a mission problem in the Presbyterian Church and in mainline Protestant churches and Catholic churches too. Hunter speaks lovingly in here of mission-minded congregations, and Covenant is one, Broad Street is one. There are many mission-minded congregations where mission's important, where you fund it well, where you have mission champions, people who say, if we don't do mission, we're not really a church. Don't you dare cut that mission budget to build the new whatever. I'm a mission champion in my church, right? I've said those sorts of things. And he speaks lovingly of mission-minded congregations. But in his experience in the past couple of decades, this cultural undertow has occurred that has modified mission in congregations. And in the book, he talks about it as a selfie mission movement. You know, your cell phone, where you take a picture of yourself. Hey, look at me. I'm in this cool, exotic place, and you know, and the mountains behind you. Or look at me, I'm taking care of this poor child, this hungry child, this Black child usually, right, person of color. And it ends up being all about me, my transformation that happened because I helped these people, and I feel good. And he's saying that when the primary beneficiaries of our mission, especially global mission, become us and our trip and our good time and our feelings of goodness, then that's not healthy. That's not what Christ would want us to do. And it's become such a part of our culture, it's almost become normalized. So this is me in the city called La Arroya, actually on the way to La Arroya, Peru. La Arroya is 10 hours up into the Andes Mountains. And at some point along the way we stopped, and there's this house along the side of the road. And I remember why I wanted to stop and what I felt like. I said, oh my gosh, I live in Upper Arlington, Ohio. I have never in my life seen a house like this, and I never will again. Take a picture of me, you guys. Because that was such a dilapidated shack or hut, I thought. Well, that's about the nicest house I saw the next 2 weeks. And now I see this picture totally differently. You know, it's really a solidly constructed house. It has all the mortar, it has all the bricks, it has a roof. It has a tin roof. It has a tin roof with an overhang so that the water doesn't come straight down into the door, and it has a solid door. I mean, I was just such a newbie at all of this. And I share that with you to let you know, it's not somewhere you start, right? It's where you go along the journey. And I've come a long way. So it's easy to forget when we talk about mission, whose mission is it? It's not our mission, it's God's mission. It's the mission of God in the world. We're trying to join with him and with fellow children of God with the work he's already doing and that we believe he's calling us to do. And that's important when you're trying to decide what to do, because it's not like what you want to do. Like maybe you want to build a school. Well, maybe in the community you're working with, they don't need a school, they need something else. You need to be listening to them, spreading this circle of relationship, because that is where Jesus tells us to be. This book is full of all these scriptural references. The New Testament doesn't use 21st century language, right? But it talks about being one with each other so that we can be on this level playing field and God can be in our midst and doing the work in our midst. Mission doesn't work when we white rich people come in and serve poor Black people. We need to be on these parallel lines and And a lot of the work with your mission coworker is to get you to that place. So the book talks about 3 foundational stones, 3 foundations for doing mission right: theology of companionship, cultural humility, and the real power of co-development. Yeah, when I started this a couple of weeks ago, I sort of did a book report. So I had to like get rid of all that. I'm like, they don't want to hear about the book. They want to hear about how what we did reflects what Hunter later wrote in the book. So my journey with Global Mission started in 2001, where at Broad Street, we became aware of a group of people through our Peace USA missionary, Hunter Farrell. They're in the Andes Mountains, and they thought their children were being poisoned by lead. The world's 2nd largest heavy metal smelter, which means it melts ore into heavy metals, was located there. And they thought their children had lead poisoning. Lead poisoning causes mental retardation, among other things. It settles in your brain, your bone, your kidneys. But in growing children, it literally mucks up the electrical system, and they're slow, retarded the rest of their lives. And the mothers were saying that's what's going on. And the townspeople were saying, well, we want to know if that's really happening, and if so, just press this company to stop doing it. And I got assigned to this team. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's La Roya Peru. You know, there's other teams. You know, I want to go with the team that visits the women who make these things and these things. You know, like really, like lead testing, like lead poisoning. Talk to companies and make them stop. Like that's not in my wheelhouse. Oh, okay. Back up a little, Jen. Where were we? Okay, so a little map. This, I have talked to people who don't know where Peru is. You guys know, I know, but this is South America. Peru's along the coast. Here's Lima, Peru. Here's Lima, Peru. If you take a rickety bus 10 hours straight east, you'll end up in La Roya, Peru. And this is it. This is the town. That's mountain behind you. It is not snow. That's sulfuric acid deposits. I think if I had seen this before I went, I don't think I would have gone. I mean, it's a lot to swallow for a girl from Ohio, right? But that's the place we went to, and we're called to do work. So to summarize, 10 years of work in Peru, in 2002, with Broad Street, we did some preliminary lead testing. We soon linked through our Peace USA missionary with other Presbyterian congregations. He probably had about 20 in all working on this project. The company in Peru had its headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri. They were having the same problems in Missouri. They joined forces. Because of our preliminary lead testing in 2002, the St. Louis University School of Medicine and Public Health was able to find funding and people to come to our little town in La Roya and do a real epidemiologically correct health study of the lead poisoning. In 2005, we found out through SEC filings that this company that said they didn't have any money to install the right pollution equipment made $400 million in profit the year before. So when they said they don't have 10 million to do what they agreed to do in their contract with the Peruvian government, that didn't really make sense. We had many partners in this effort, including the Catholic Church. They had got a new archbishop in that part of South America, and we met with him. And he taught me about earth care. Like, oh, that's the terminology we use. And to take care of God's world as he would want us to do. And eventually, through all of this, the Supreme Court of Peru declared La Roya a national health emergency and ordered things to happen. It didn't actually happen that quickly, but that was our success. Back to 2002, when we first got there. This is me. This is Broad Streeter Emily Krause Corzine, who's now a Presbyterian minister and is the moderator of the Presbyterian of Soda Valley. So she's come a long way from lead testing in Peru. This is Dora, the local nurse, whom we partnered with. You just can't come into a strange city with your equipment and just start doing things. So Hunter Farrell organized this co-relationship with this OBGYN nurse. This is where you went to have babies, but she let us set up a blood testing equipment, and this is somebody getting his finger pricked to get the little blood out to test. So when they asked me to get on this team, I was like, lead, we've got to know that there's really lead poisoning. Mothers saying there's lead poisoning just did not rake leaves with me. So I said, I need to get data. So I like to say, I don't know everything, but I do know how to make a phone call. So phone call. I found out there's a way to test in your blood how much lead is in there. You can get an instant result because we're going to be up where there's not electricity, right? There's no laboratory you don't send it to Quest Labs, right? There's just no such thing like that. So I found out about instant testing. The machine's $5,000. The strips to test are $750 per 50. It's this isn't going to work. So the Ohio Department of Health, his last name was Belt, John Belt, Mark Belt, somebody let me borrow their lead testing equipment and take it with me. Right? It's just things that don't normally happen. How can this be? The company that makes lead testing equipment at the last minute gave me 2 boxes of 50 of the little lead strips, the little strips to put the blood on. The lead testing equipment is something like if you have diabetes and take a little bit of blood and put it on your strip and put it in the machine like that. It's relatively easy to test glucose. It's pretty hard to test really small amounts of lead. But the company gave me those, and when they did, they said, when we developed this machine, we needed to go to the place with the worst lead poisoning in the world to see if it worked at the highest levels. And we went to La Roy, Peru. And the CDC came with us.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I'm paraphrasing, do you know, little girl, what you're getting into? And that was my first indication that this is not big. This is real and it's big. But the women on this, and who lived there, their children didn't have this information because the company took it back with them, made their lead testing equipment, sell it all over the world. But the people on the ground didn't know if they had lead poisoning or not. Didn't have a way to know if there's lead poisoning or not. By the time your kid is retarded, it's too late to do anything about it. So we set up shop. That picture of Emily and I, we did the lead testing. We found out that 100% of the people had lead poisoning. An acceptable amount, some people say there's no acceptable amount of lead in your body, in your blood. But on the machine, 10 and under is acceptable. There's some minor degree of lead poisoning, but under 10 in the States, they won't do anything with. Above 10, they start doing things. John Belt at the Ohio Department of Health said, you won't see above 20. Our lowest kid had 22. Most were in the 40s. The machine stopped at 65, and we had kids over 65. The flat affect, that's what I call it. I don't know what else to call it. Little kids who are just go flopping along a little. And yeah, right, that's what we found. I had 100 strips, but I didn't do 100 people, 100 kids, because I was like, oh my gosh, my machine's broken. Poor Emily Corzine. Emily, let me test you again. So I tested her like 6 times because I thought I contaminated my machine. But no, we didn't do that. These were legitimate results over and over and over again. So here we are in La Roy, Peru. We have these amazing results. And before we left, 2 weeks later, the local media found out about it. When I say local, I mean in Lima, Peru, 10 hours away. They sent reporters. This is NPR. This is their national investigative reporter. This is Hunter Farrell. I just left next slide. Do we have any? Oh, this is like their 60 Minutes woman in Peru. She came and interviewed us and did a story. That's Emily and I. So my point is, I was asked to do something. I was like, no, I want to do this. This is nice. This is pretty. And instead, we did blood testing and we got the word out. with the help of other people. It's not my skill set, not what I'm good at doing, but Hunter brought people with the right skills and the right interest in at the right time. So, back up there. There you go. So Peace USA mission facilitators are your key to successful short-term mission trips. Hunter and his wife, Ruth. At the time at Broad Street, Reverend Judy Hoffine was our associate pastor, and she was really into global mission. We had a pastor who was not so much. He said, yeah, we need a global mission partner, but he was smart enough to get out of the way and let Judy lead, right? And this organic energy developed with her and them leading us so that we didn't step into the minefields of what has become self-mission and it being all about us. Okay, so how do you get there? How did we get there? Well, Hunter was instilling in us the principles in his book, I just didn't know it at the time, of companionship, cultural humility, and co-development. So how do you get companionship with people who don't speak your language, don't have your same cultural references, huge economic difference? Well, one of the things he did, the first thing, we had a dance. He said, dance? I chose this picture because this is Mariana McQueen's daughter, DeLynn McQueen. I know Mariana was a long time member here, and DeLynn was instrumental in our early days in Peru. So here she is dancing, sort of like a square dance with Peruvians. Soccer. Here's one of our Broad Street youth, soccer ball. I mean, you know, what I need to say about soccer. That levels the playing field, right? All these things level the playing field. One of our youth brought a Frisbee. They had never seen a Frisbee. So teaching the kids how to play Frisbee, leveling the playing field. One of our high school youth with the kids, I think they're doing homework actually. He's not doing her homework. She's showing him how to do math, right? You know, she's showing him. So it's a difference in your thinking about how you interact with other children of God. And relationships that you would never think would develop did. Between our privileged Broad Street people and women who've had a hard, rough life. Getting to time. Oh, okay. Co-development. Development's hard, right? This is an empty lot in Lima, Peru. It looks even worse in real life than what it does there. But a school was built on that lot because, well, somebody went on the first Peru crew trip, that's what we called our short-term mission trips, Peru Crew 1, Peru Crew 2. Somebody went on Peru Crew 1, after he came back, Mark Westwater, he died of cancer, I believe, and he wanted to build a school in Lima for these children that he felt so strongly about. And so what do we do? What does Hunter have us do? Meet with the locals that he has assembled and decide where to do that school. Well, they wanted it in that lot. And I was like, this lot? This isn't a slum. Well, $30,000 of donations, memorials, there's a 3-story school, feeds 2 meals a day, educates how many kids, and it's exactly where it needs to be. They knew where it needed to be, right where the kids are. So that's a good example of co-development. These artisan goods that the women weave and make, they need a market for them. So a different group of Broad Streeters helped bring these things to market. And I love this picture because it's transparent economic development. So as the women made their goods, they kept track of how many you made, and they put it on the wall. So that when these were sold, and we didn't know how much to pay her, they put it on the wall. So this is a great example of economic development. And through all of this is Hunter and Rick Delaney from Broad Street. All of this mission stuff is fun. So don't think it's too hard of work for anybody. It's always intergenerational, at least there's a Broad Street, that's one of our pillars, and it's just a whole lot of fun. Okay, and then I think we already did that.
So
So that's it. I'll take questions or later.
So do you do joint programs with other Presbyterian congregations like ours, for example? Like would we come and work on yours or on one with you, or each church develop its own program?
Well, that's a good question. Each church does its own thing, but it's your Peace USA mission partner who organizes it. So if you choose Mark Hare or Jim McGill, they'll help you do one step, and then another congregation will do the next step, and another congregation will do the next step. All that said, I've been to St. Louis, Missouri to meet with the Presbyterian there and churches there, and I've talked to, I can't tell you how many on the phone. Because the funnest things in my life, bar none, are when I pick up the phone at home and somebody says, you don't know me, Patty, but Hunter Farrell gave me your name and number. Starts another layer. You can do it whatever you want, but it'll work.
I came late, so you answered this, just like forget, ask someone else. But were you concerned for your own health and your own exposure to that? How to mitigate that?
Well, that and the company goons that followed us and like all sorts of things, it's not safe. And I talked to many sessions, you wanna send people, and they say, is it safe? I said, well, no. I mean, but no, there are risks, there's health risks, food, water, safety, car wrecks, I mean, there are risks. I can't tell you there's none. For myself, as an adult female, cognitively developed, I'm not too worried. And then somebody showed me some study that said I get more lead from drinking red wine than I put there, so. It all depends on how you choose to get your lead. But, 2 weeks, it's all about exposure, right? 2 weeks is not gonna harm me.
Thank you.
I think you raised a great question in terms of, who do we work with? How do we partner? Is it just across those international lines and with our mission coworkers within our own neighborhoods? And what are the safety risks? What risks are we taking, whether it's physical, emotional? All those things are things that we think about, and that's those questions. And taking the time is what I think about when I think about slow missions. So it's really easy to get really excited about something. You see something on 60 Minutes, you have a conversation at a dinner party, you find about some issue cause, you make a connection with someone and you want to jump on board. And it's really about taking a step back and really thinking about where is God in that interest and finding a biblical scriptural basis for that connection. And then asking the questions, what role can I play? What role can our congregation play? Who can we partner with to do that? And so it's really asking questions, reflecting on what it is that you hope to accomplish, but really realizing that it's really not about you and that you are a partner and you become part of something that's so much greater and that really does become God's mission in the world. And at Broad Street, we've been doing this for a long time, and I was a beneficiary. Patty was one of the first. I went on a trip probably about 7-8 years after the first trip. And at that time, we had a transition in our mission coworker. So Hunter Farrell had come back stateside. We had a new mission coworker. We had new leadership at our church, but we had planned to go on a trip. And I was on that trip. And there were a lot of great things, but there were a lot of missteps. And it was because we didn't take the time to take a step back and say, we've done this really well, let's continue. But what's changed? The context has changed, the leadership has changed, the people going on the trip have changed, and it wasn't a great trip. Did good things come out of it? Absolutely. It was transformational for me. That's why I stand here today, and led to 4 more trips to Peru and then Malawi, which I will speak about in just a moment. But we sometimes need to take a step back and reevaluate why we do what we do. And so the book, and Patty mentioned, there is transformational power, but we have to make sure that there are things in place for that transformation to really be lasting and powerful and scripturally based. And it's that cultural proficiency, understanding that we're crossing lines and that our lens is very different from the lens with those that we are working with. Taking off our white savior cloak that we wear, and we sitting in this room, we are the privileged and we feel like we have all the answers, and the reality is we don't, especially when we go into a context that's very different from our own. So joint planning, as Patty was talking about. Yes.
When you say scripturally based, does that mean the kind of mission that you're providing, like education and health for living, or whatever? What is this?
So when I talk about
Go out and
spiritual
be
based,
a-
yeah, I think it's that God is working in this world. And we have a vision of that and an understanding of that through scripture. And that's where we need to come from. That's our starting place, as opposed to just being, I'm taking a class and we had this question, like, why do we do what we do? And we can go out and we can be an NGO, a social services, and provide resources and solutions and work with people. But where's the transcendent nature of that? And that comes from being scripturally based. Does that make sense? So as a congregation, Broad Street went through this process, I went through this process. There's an orientation. So before you begin the trip, what were you going to experience? Who are we working with? Community building within the team that's going on that mission trip, but as well as building relationships with your mission coworkers and beginning to know who you will be working with on the ground. And then while you're there, community building, the dancing, playing soccer, but also at the end of a long day, when you've been out lead testing, we've been out digging a latrine for a school in the mountains, coming back and debriefing with your group. Like, what did we experience? How are you feeling? Because it's a lot, it really is. And then post-trip reflection. So when you come back, how do you carry what you gained? How do you bring that back? And how do you live that out day in and day out? Because we can't go to La Arroya every day, but can we live out our mission and the lessons that we've learned when we come back to the States? And how do we live that out? Yeah.
Curiosity question, how do you deal with negative feelings you might experience? Because, I mean, I say that I'm an anthropologist by profession. I did a year of field work, and now I'm also supposed to find there was very rewarding, great people, sometimes I want to point.
Yeah, I think you've hit on the real thing. When we talked about, you asked about the risk, that's the emotional vulnerability. And I think we have to be able to sit with that and know that life is hard and that there is injustice in this world. But through God and through our walk with Jesus and with our partners, that there is hope. And I think that's that processing piece, that's why it's so important, because you come back and you're wiped out. And sure, in your experience, there were times you're like, I don't know if I can keep going. This is so wrong on so many levels. And how do we continue to keep pushing forward? Yeah.
How does I can see the service piece, is there a minister or a pastor or someone local that they work with where the ongoing ministry and shepherding the flock and conversion and so forth all happens?
Yes, and that's essentially why the mission coworkers are so important and their local affiliation. So I'm going to shift to talk about sort of another way that mission is done that follows these same principles, to add some more insight to that. So I'm in the midst of like reading and kind of reevaluating my life, and Brene Brown has been someone that's been speaking to me, and I'm sure many of you have come across it. And this quote just hits me. We need to hold hands with strangers. We need reminders, collective joy and pain, reminders that we are inextricably linked to one another. And so I traveled to Peru multiple trips, but through that, and Rick Delaney, who you saw a picture of, who's a member of Broad Street and is kind of like, yes. He had gone with Mary Medical Mission to Malawi, and I went on that trip. Gosh, it's been nine years now. So I just wanted to share just a brief reflection of that, and then talk about how Marian Medical Mission follows these same principles. Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require? With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? In the darkness before dawn, Reverend Phillips' sanctuary with concrete floors, heavy metal pews, and windows without glass was a stark contrast to my familiar sanctuary in Columbus, Ohio. I was asked to open the early morning devotion with a prayer. My words were foreign to the participants, and the echo of my words off the cold walls reminded me of how far I was from home. Even though I was praying, I felt very alone. The Reverend continued the time of devotion with words of appreciation for the work Marian Medical Mission was doing. As I looked out into the people warming the cold pews, I questioned why I was there. Why was I, a happily married 41-year-old educator and a mother of 2 teenage girls, sitting in front of a dark sanctuary 14 days into a 21-day mission trip in the wilderness of Malawi? I missed my family. The local voices that filled my days spoke a language so foreign. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Many times I doubted the why of this journey. Yet, as the first light of the day broke through the windows, with a multitude of pink hues and strong voices singing Amazing Grace and Chichewa filled the sanctuary, I felt the Spirit surrounding me and tears ran down my dirt-stained cheeks. At that moment, I did not feel lonely. In my journal that evening, I wrote, I hear a voice. I don't fully understand it. I just feel the need to follow it. I'm not sure of what I believe, but I do know that I am part of God's creation. The sunset this evening was beautiful, so big, it filled the sky, so close. I felt its presence as it sank behind the distant mountain. I hear a voice calling me. I live now, searching now, trying to follow the voice. Maybe it is only my voice. No, this voice is bigger than my own, God's voice. I hear it and informs me about my place in this world. God, give me the strength to continue to hear your voice. This trip was a continuation of what had been for me a 7-year journey. In those years, I had made 5 trips to Peru and now Malawi. What was I seeking? In Peru and Malawi, I had been witness to the systemic causes of poverty. I've come to understand the significance of the global community and God's presence in this community. There were many moments of doubt. Was I making a difference? Was I building relationships, doing justice, spreading the love of God? The seeds of doubt that often surfaced in this unfamiliar land were continually replanted in the dry red clay of Africa and were cultivated into hope by the singing of the women, the laughter of the children, and the earnest prayers of the village headman. This wasn't about me. It was about all of God's children. God was, is, and will be in Malawi, the heart of Africa. So I started that, it's about me, but it really isn't about me. And so Marian Medical Mission is not congregational based, but it is a organization that was started by Tom and Jocelyn Logan. He was medical missionary essentially, and they saw a problem and they needed to figure out a way to solve the problem. And there's Marian Medical Mission has a loose affiliation with PCUSA. It's not an official PCA USA, but they have connections. And through Rick and Patty, who's also been to Malawi, we have the shared heritage. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it's an organization that lives out cultural humility, lives out co-development, lives out companionship. And the role of the American volunteers is really just to bear witness and to be in solidarity with the work that happens on the ground in Malawi. So Marian Medical Mission essentially builds shallow wells. Like I could go on for like forever about this, but all of the work happens with local churches in Malawi. So Tom Logan and Marian Medical Mission has a small board here in the United States. They've got a small staff, and all of the work really happens in Malawi, as well as Tanzania and Zambia as offshoots. They build shallow wells. The villagers determine the site with the site coordinator that is in Malawi, from that village, and they determine where the well goes. They use, you can see the gentlemen, they dig it with very minimal tools in their shallow wells. So they can be in the most remote places and that they don't require any electricity. They're just a manual pump that's created and built and manufactured in Malawi. So it's self-sustaining. And the only thing that they really need from us, Americans, is money and someone to share the story. And the villagers do all the work. So here you get a vision of this gentleman, this is a crew. So you've got an area coordinator, and then you've got the maintenance gentlemen who work with the villagers to actually install the pump and then maintain it. Here they're installing the pump and then they're talking about how to maintain the pump. And again, it's so hard to think about the profound impact of what they do. I'm catching myself because I want to leave time for questions. But they've built over 45,000 wells, served over 5 million people with these shallow wells. The wells are still in existence 20 years after they've been installed. They pay a small fee a year per village that goes into a pot. And then the villagers call one of the maintenance that is another villager to do the work, and they compensate them with rice, chicken, something that's sustainable and affordable. The coolest thing is at the time I did this, and this goes to that companionship of walking with them, and that we're not the ones with all the answers. Two of the site coordinators, you can see in the upper top left picture, came to the United States while I was teaching at Columbus Academy and had the opportunity to bring them in. I taught 7th grade social studies, and it's a global perspective and looking at global issues. And so they came to speak with our students. And then the other piece was they got to meet my family and they got to spend time with Patty. So these people that, it's cross-cultural. We have so much to learn from them, actually more to learn from them than we have to give. And we get to walk with them in this journey together. That was so fast, and I'm sure you felt the same way. So questions?
One thing I want to say
Yeah.
about the Marian Medical Mission, it's Presbyterian related. A Presbyterian minister, Tom Logan, started it some 40 years ago, and he had 40 years ago?
Yeah.
So that long, maybe not
Yeah.
quite that long. Because Jim McGill was the PCUSA mission co-worker at the time. So ask Jim McGill all about the shallow wells that he got started in Malawi some 35 years ago or whatever. And Jim's gonna be here, I think, next month and talk. The mission co-workers that we have out there in the fields, they have so many people come through their house. I got stuck in, our car got stuck in the mud, in the rains. I stayed at Jim and Jody McGill's house for 3 days or 3 nights. This is the lowest from, anyway. And then I would catch up with him a few years later at some PCUSA mission conference. He doesn't remember me because he has so many people over to his house all the time. He doesn't remember me. I'm like, Jim McGill, I know you. You have the best shower in all of Malawi. I know that. So Jim McGill is way into water. He's a U.S. master's trained geologist from Arizona State. He helped start all this Marian Medical Mission stuff, and Tom Logan took off with it, and it's a validated ministry of PCUSA. And now I think Jim's doing a similar sort of thing in other countries. So all connected.
So I came a little late, so I must have missed it all, but for our congregation, what are the opportunities to obviously give money to the water well thing Mr. Logan does? You don't go there and you don't dig wells, you just donate it back.
You could, yes. I mean,
Back up to your picture.
yeah, so
We do go there.
we do go, but it's a spotlight, so they take a small crew.
This is
Oh, yeah.
This is the one. This is we only do co-development. They do what they can do, we do what they cannot do.
Yeah.
They can dig a well with a hand trowel. They can make the bricks, they do all the work. All we do is pump with plastic pipe and a metal pump and put it on top.
Yeah.
And then we track it and we record data. So at every well site, we have a GPS device so they can monitor it.
Right, because $450 for that is just way too much for anyone to spend.
So for your congregation, I think, it's best shared, the connection with individual congregation members with your mission coworkers. That's the starting place.
Right.
And
Right.
then you begin to explore what are the opportunities, and it goes back to your mission coworkers. Like where do we align in terms of what's important? So I would, you would do essentially a self-study and ask yourselves, this is the work that's happening. You'll have an opportunity to meet with all of your mission coworkers in the next 4 weeks and find out what it is that they are working on. Peru has changed since 20-some years ago. The smelter has been shut down. There's been a settlement and a lawsuit. So the current mission coworker is reevaluating and really looking at specifically, and it's a direct outreach of La Arroya, but indigenous rights. So as the developing world is continually at the mercy of the developed world in terms of natural resources, how do we protect the rights? And so Jed Cobalt, who's the coworker, is thinking, reimagining what that looks like. And so we will be a part of that conversation and how do we continue our 20+ year relationship, but it might look different than it did 20 years ago, 5 years ago. Does that help?
Yeah, but a cut list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, here's the 3 missions currently open. Here's the process of getting involved with all of our local, people that are
Right.
doing this and meet around.
Be on the committee that
This is-
decides.
Or do it. I'm
Yeah,
doing all my
let me
tools.
decide.
Yeah, and this will
Hard
be
work.
your roadmap. There, and we would love, if you talked about working with our current Broad Street, I'd love to partner with Covenant and share the work that we've done and be just a part of the conversation. We don't have all the answers. We've just done the work, and we had Hunter Farrell, we've had a group of people, but we would love to partner. But it's really what you feel called, and you have to discern and prayerfully consider that.
I have a question about Peru, about the lead, and I'm sure that there's ongoing testing for lead, right? I mean, y'all have moved, or they've moved on, and they're doing different things now in terms of mission and interacting and stuff, but I'm assuming that because you found such a high incidence and it was such an issue, that it continues to be monitored. You're saying no.
They shut down the plant.
Yes, but there were many variables with that.
Yes.
The 2008 recession hit. The local miners would not send their ore because they didn't think they'd get paid because the owners of the company had screwed them so many times. So that global financial crisis and their partners really is what did them in. And then they defaulted on a big loan. And then, so the environmental thing was one aspect of it, because we tried to make clear all along, we don't want to shut down the plant. That's not our goal. We don't want, they need it to make a living. But they did sign an agreement with the Peruvian government that said they'd spend $10 million a year for 10 years. Big numbers, right? When we found out they made $400 million in profit 1 year, that sort of dissolved that, right? So.
And I think the key is we're not the ones to drive, like
Right.
we provided that information, and then the local, and we can support and walk with them, but it really does come back to what's happening on the ground in La Roya, in Lima, in the courts, and that's the hardest part, is that we can't fix it. We can be an instrument of advocacy, walking in partnership, providing things that they couldn't provide themselves, but
I don't know that testing's still going on. I don't know.
All that money with that many millions, they couldn't afford to test it.
and they were doing that here stateside. They were actually,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
the laws in the US
it's
were
just
so
that-
much more enforceable.
There's just not resources there. And, right.
Does
There's nobody
anyone know,
doing
does
that.
Covenant support Marion now with any support?
I don't know.
Oh, does Covenant, I don't know, it's a nationwide thing, yeah, I don't know if you do.
Yeah, I mean, a well's 450, so I mean,
Right,
I've
right.
been involved in situations where a family's done one, or
Yeah.
the
Right.
church has supported 5
Right.
wells, or whatever.
right,
CAS did that, the company I worked for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
We supported wells too.
Jen is going to Malawi this year, she didn't tell you this, it's a 3-week session, and 3 days to get there, 3 weeks, 3 days, I mean, it's a big time commitment. But she's going to Malawi this year, it's the well season. They build the wells at the end of the dry season, so that when they dig and they hit water, they
They
go
know
5
there's
more
water.
feet after that, and anyway, if they dig it then, there'll always be water. So it's a certain timing, we wish we go in the summer, cause that fits our schedules, right?
Yeah.
But fall is the dry season.
David Hammarskjöld, who was Secretary General of the UN in 1960, stated that the largest crisis facing us in the future was access to clean water. And with the global climate change, especially in Africa, it is already a major, major crisis. So, doing a well that's simple, that they can do and hand pump it, and that is,
Right,
I'm on
it's-
target.
It is, it's technologically simple and they can maintain it, so there's just an elegance of that, so thank Jim McGill when he comes here for.
And I think
designing it.
that's the power of this work, is that as a congregation, we do things with our mission coworkers, but we also are transformed in a way that we feel compelled to do other things. And I think about being an educator and bringing this to my students and working and that's the hardest part for me in the classroom, is to take away the scriptural basis of it and the setting that I'm in, but it still informs me. And short-term mission has its downfalls. There are ways that we get it wrong and we actually do more harm than good. However, it is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful way to bring about change in this world, is through mission co-workers and working as a partner and making a difference. And so individually we do it as a congregation. There are lots of opportunities.
I was wondering, with the water and well program, because it's such limited becoming, you put in a plastic pipe top, that the price directed mission, it's sort of so fast that you're gone, and they sort of remember you when they're pumping the water. But how does it tie into like those longer term missions where you're making gifts, building structures, whatever, and you have that hands-on interface with
I think that's the reframing of it, that the real work is not the work that I'm doing. It's the work that Marion Medical Mission is doing and the local site coordinators and the infrastructure that's established. And this is really more about walking in partnership and solidarity and sharing what's happening and what they are doing on their own. And that's sustainable, and that's really true power, and handing it over to those that are being helped so that they can help themselves.
And this proved true during the pandemic, because we couldn't go, right? You didn't, but this continued.
They put in 3,000 wells.
Raise money, but the work goes on all year. The local people are meeting with villagers, they apply, they agree to pay $7 US to do all this. So there's all that long-term relationship going on without us.
And this is a weird, almost a Baptist-like question, but I know that the Christian church is growing faster in Africa and South America, and Korea, I guess. But do you know the numbers for the growth of the Christian church in Africa from?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it is significant. I mean, the growth of the church is because of Africa, Latin America, and it's an evangelical movement.
Yeah.
And what do we have to learn? So part of the conversations we're having in my class right now is we always think about missionaries being white Americans, Europeans going to these developing countries. What do we have to learn from them? How are they growing their churches? What are they doing that we're not doing here? So is there this concept, and I don't like the term, but it's a quick way to say it, reverse mission, so that their leadership comes to the US and shares what it is that they are doing. And obviously the context is different, but the church is growing, and there's a sense that it's more based on scripture.
Yes.
As opposed to social capital.
Good
You know,
words.
there's a phrase, and I think it was this or maybe in a reading, that many of our churches become in the US just a social organization of people who are alike. And then I'm not discounting our faith, but in many ways it just becomes, these are the people I'm comfortable with, we have shared interests, and we say we're a church. But really, what is the work of the church? And that's spreading the word of God, and that's crossing cultural boundaries and differences and coming together. And so we do have a lot to learn.
Thank you, Jen and Pat.